Hi, I'm Matt Barry. This is Low Budget Visions, where we celebrate personal DIY independent filmmaking. And I'm joined today by Luis Hernandez. Luis is a Chicano filmmaker from Little Rock, Arkansas. Focused on telling original and meaningful stories, Luis mixes moments of everyday life with his surreal imagination, creating an honest and humble world. So, Luis, thanks for speaking with me today. I want to mention before we dive in that I met you back in the fall at the Philovision Film Festival up in Philadelphia, where we were both showing some short films. And I was really taken with your animation work that you were doing. And I wanted to have you on here to talk a little bit about that further. So, welcome to the show.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Matt. Yeah, I remember when we met at that screening. I didn't even intentionally, I wasn't actually going to show a movie. I showed up to the screening last minute, and then during intermission, I asked the host if I could show something, and I emailed it to her like last second. So that was a little bit of a blessing last minute. And then now we're here.
Yeah, well, glad to be talking with you again. And that film that you showed at that festival, now that was Chalk, right? That was the
Yeah, Chuck.
animated short Chalk. It seems like animation is from what I've seen of your work, kind of the main medium that you're working in film. Is that fair to say?
Uh, in some ways, it's definitely what I've been going like into more recently. I started more traditionally, just like going to film school and doing more live action stuff, more short films in live action and then feature films. And then the past couple years, just offhandedly started just doing stuff on the side, like animation stuff. Um, and then now it's been definitely, I wouldn't say been my primary, but what I've been more focused on lately.
Okay. Well, I want to ask you a little bit about your background actually before we go any further. Could you talk a little bit about how you started making films? I mean, you mentioned going to film school. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and kind of how it put you on the trajectory that you're on now?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in a family of artists. I'm the youngest of four. All my siblings do all different types of forms of art. And I actually wasn't into art that much. I was more into sports growing up. And it wasn't until I was maybe about 12 or 13, I started watching a lot of home movies that my dad would make. And I just found that fascinating, just like documenting these moments that you can just kind of bounce back in time, right? And so I saved up, bought a little tiny camera for like $100 and just filmed stuff around the house for fun. Um, and then when it went going into college, I just decided to do filmmaking and art. I kind of like the art bug finally hit me. And in school, I think that's where I really hit my stride and like actually focusing on it. So I wasn't this big like watching movies like crazy growing up or anything like that. Um, I think I was just always creative in different ways. And once I went to film school, that's where I really started focusing on it more and then kind of seeing the world through that lens. Um, and then in post school, just started working on projects. I just like, not even just film, but all types of art, just always wanted to make stuff all the time.
Okay, that's interesting that you're saying through watching the home movies that kind of opened your eyes to I guess, the possibilities of film and video was it because of the sort of the documentary aspect of it that really appealed to you?
I think a little bit of that and just I'm the youngest, so there's a lot of stuff in my family I wasn't able to see, and just that I could kind of literally travel back in time and see my younger or see my siblings when they were younger or my age, or see my parents before they came to the U.S. and they were still in Mexico. So that definitely fascinated me, and I just wanted to like replicate that. So I was literally just filming stuff like how my dad filmed. I was like, "This is the house right now," and like things like that. And then it slowly developed into being more creative and making like little funny skits and stories and things like that. Um, but also, I was really influenced by I used to skate growing up, and just all those like skate videos. Me and my brother would rent skate videos from the video store, and I just always liked that style, that I guess raw style, or the style of just like you're living your life and you're documenting what's happening in front of you. Not even necessarily documentary, but just seeing what's happening in front of people's lives, I guess.
Would you describe it as kind of like a diary, like a video diary approach?
I would say something like that, yeah.
Now, do you have, as you were kind of starting to move into making films, you mentioned, going to film school. Was that a point, at the point that you decided to go to film school, had you already started to explore these more, as you're kind of putting it, more creative uses of video, or did that grow out of your experiences in film school?
Definitely throughout high school, I was just making little funny videos with my friends like all the time. That's what we did pretty much all the summer and like on the weekends. And going into film school, it was actually deciding that or like doing some, like physical therapy or something like that. And it wasn't until like my first or second year in college that I switched my major. Uh, so I was pretty conflicted throughout like my whole life of what direction I really wanted to go. But I think once I realized this is what I want to do, then it just kept going.
Great. Well, I'm curious if you could now sort of like maybe start to walk us through your filmography. As you're going from doing the short videos and in high school and your first film school projects, is there a point where you feel like your work really started to kind of take form and like in a way it's almost like, I guess for you personally where it's like this is kind of where your work as a filmmaker really starts to take off. Is there a particular project, or could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think my first one that to me still holds up as like because you make stuff 5 years ago, and to you it's just like it's a thing I made a long time ago, whatever. I think the first thing where I really felt I was coming into whatever I am as an artist was my thesis film in college, which was called Los Vagos, which is about this guy who basically just films people as he talks to them and just like makes stories out of them, and it's this almost like vignette look at his life. Um, But I remember I wanted to quit school actually. I was tired of being in college, and I was the only reason I went back was to make that project. And that project I wrote for like an entire summer, produced for like 6 months, and actually, shot it. Um, and I think that was the first one. One, because I think it was the first time I was actually being vulnerable, and actually like I guess in some ways exposing myself or looking into myself as opposed to just kind of doing things for fun. Um, and also it was the first time I really, really just like looked in the mirror and just like went deep into what I'm wanting to say, what I'm wanting to do, and just putting in like, that effort of making it quality as opposed to something that just takes a weekend to make. But I'd say that was definitely the first one.
Okay. I was curious if there were any particular, like looking back on it, any particular circumstances or reasons that you feel that you took that kind of deeper approach with that project. Like you said, really kind of being more vulnerable, maybe making it more personal. Do you feel like looking back that there was any particular circumstances that led you to take that direction at that particular moment with that film?
I think at the time I was about 20, 21 when I wrote it and made it. And I think that's just a pivotal time in anyone's life. They're kind of questioning who they are, what they're wanting to do, all that kind of stuff. But also I think just the way I've grown up in very like machismo kind of culture and that kind of stuff, you're not really supposed to talk about anything and you kind of keep everything bottled up and you just kind of deal with it yourself. And around that time in my life, I was for the first time actually processing things and letting things come out, as opposed to just, stuffing them somewhere. So I think it was very pivotal for me at that time, looking at what it is that I am, what I'm doing, and how I'm even feeling. And for me, I think I find it easier to answer questions about myself by asking other people, uh, and just like talking with other people and hearing what they have to say. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's almost like a reflection. And this project specifically, I mean, the guy, he like learns about himself by filming other people. And so it's definitely like highly correlated to how I was kind of processing myself at the time. But I think just very pivotal time in my life. And then I think after that, it just opened up to where now I don't care. Now it's just whatever, however, when I express myself, that's how I do it.
That's interesting because I know like we were talking about the use of home movies as being and then this idea of in this film this character filming other people as a way of kind of dealing with the world. And I guess that is, that is one of the things that filmmaking provides in any format. It's, really a way of interacting with the world of, using the camera to explore the world and feelings about it. So, do you think that that also ties in with your kind of early interest in home movies?
Yeah, I think so. I think definitely also just I guess like the wall you have being like the cameraman, right? You can kind of say whatever you want, but you're also kind of being protected because you're behind the camera. Um, and I think with home movies, it's pretty similar in a way because you're just showing what the life is, but not necessarily showing yourself, or you don't have to necessarily, but you're showing yourself through what's the situation you live in, who's around you, that kind of stuff. Um, So I think that was definitely one thing is just putting myself, even though I'm not in the movie or anything like that, putting myself in front of the camera through the writing, through what's being said, as opposed to just kind of hiding behind it.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Um, with that project, as you were, learning from everything that you made, that you got out of making that project, and how did that inform, your next project, where you saw yourself going with filmmaking after that? Did it kind of change your direction, change your focus about how you thought about filmmaking as something you were going to continue with?
Yeah, in some ways, I think, like I said, I was like 21 at the time, so it was a couple years ago, but it definitely influenced me in the way of being okay with being vulnerable, being okay with just putting myself out there, and just at the core of it is being an artist and just expressing myself. That was what, like the first big thing, and besides that, it was just on. It also helped me dictate how I work, and like what actually is important and what's not important. And to me, at least me personally, it's all about the feelings and the emotions you get when watching. I'm not the biggest like plot guy and creating this like three arc story, anything like that. To me, it's just this moments in time, these vignettes, these scenes that evoke some sort of emotion with the characters and ideally with the audience. So it definitely helped me find what my style is. And that my style is always growing and changing and evolving, but um, it also helped me just figure out how I work, which is I kind of just write a lot and word vomit on paper, and then I edit, and then I do it again, and I edit again, and it's just this like repeating trial and error until I kind of finally like what I like, or finally get what I like. Um, yeah, so it definitely helped me figure out how I work and what my process is.
Well, that's great when a project can provide that, because it is like a moment of discovery as an artist, as a filmmaker at a personal level. So it sounds like that was a really important project for you. Kind of like looking back on it, it seems like that must have been a real turning point as far as where your work was going. That's good to hear. I mean, I think it's nice when a film can, or any artistic project, that any kind of creative project can provide that, because it's, I don't know about you, but I always do like to think of each project as a learning experience in some way, even if it's not immediately apparent how it
Yeah.
is. It's nice when you can come away from it and look back on it and think, oh yeah, I can see where, this gave me a new way of doing something or a new way of thinking about something. So it sounds like this was an important project for you.
Yeah, definitely. Specifically at the time, it was. I think some of the things that I learned at that time have changed. So, like for example, when I wrote that every single word was the most important thing ever, and you can't change the word, and it must be said like this. And I think now I have much more of a looser uh hold on things, and I
Mhm.
give a lot more freedom to the actors or people I'm working with and a lot more of a collaborative feel. Whereas back then it was, which makes sense because it was so personal to me. It's like I have to say it how I have to say it. And so in some ways I feel like I got that out of my system. I got this like I have to express this out of me, whatever. I got that out. And I think now, and as you get older and more experienced, you become more nuanced and just kind of stronger at writing and things like that. So I think, and we can talk about it with my later works, but now I go way more vague with what I'm saying. And I try to say what my message is through very hard to kind of see, like very subtly, where I think that may have been a little heavy handed. Just, earlier projects, that kind of thing. And also just, I wanted to make the message very clear, where now I just kind of want to make the emotion more clear.
That makes sense. You said it's an interesting thing earlier about your writing process, that you tend to put a lot of ideas out on paper first and then really edit the writing. Has that held true for you since making that film?
Yeah, for sure. I suck at typing. I can't type. I hate working on computers. Um, and this even goes in the animation. Everything's just handmade. I don't like it. Um, but also, I mean, I just carry like a little notebook with me, or whenever I find napkins, I have an idea. And it's usually just like almost this collage of small lines or ideas that I have or little concepts, and then I kind of form it into this group of what, oh, I'm kind of trying to say this. I kind of want to talk about this, and then I just kind of puzzle it together and modify afterward. But yeah, it's all just on paper. I never write in script format, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that I think that's a great way of working if it works for you because so much of the I don't know about you, but I find like this the idea of the three act script to be very limiting for
Mhm.
me these days. I mean, I was very much trained in that approach, in film school myself and kind of the industrial approach to filmmaking with the three acts, script and hitting all the story points and beats, at all the specific pages and points throughout the script. But I found, as I continue making films, especially as I make longer films, that I've really gravitated away from that. And I think it's because for me, it feels after a certain point, it starts to feel very kind of artificial, limiting. I'm curious if you would describe it, kind of having a similar experience as you found your way of working. Did you find that this more, somewhat like looser structure of just jotting ideas down, working through them, did you find that it felt more, natural for you? Did it not feel, was it more freeing than working in a traditional script confines?
Yeah, I think I mean everyone has their way of working, kind of what they like doing and what they want to show. For me, I've tried doing like three arc stuff and more traditional like plot points. I just don't think I'm actually capable of it, to be honest. I mean, I can obviously, but my brain doesn't work that way. I don't really think of stories in this grand scheme of things. And maybe it's just what I've, gravitate towards as like sort of as far as like influences or inspirations like on day to day. But I just find really small moments really meaningful. And to me, what life is in some ways is just a bunch of small moments that kind of just connect to each other. And for me, it's hard to think of this. Well, my life is this huge thing. I was born here and then I become this. And more, it's just I ate dinner here. I got in trouble here. I fucked up somehow here. And that's kind of how I tell stories because that's how my brain works, is just these moments that lead up to things. And sometimes they may not. And it's just kind of like finding this slice of life stuff. Or sometimes it's this greater story, but just told through small moments.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. It seems like you've, really found some, very personal ways of using that approach in your filmmaking. I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about how this also developed into your animated work, because I've seen from with Chalk and Lint Film and also the Dia de los Muertos, right? You had the you've used different animation techniques, and I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about that.
I guess one thing is just when I've even started doing animation stuff, again, it was just like on the side, just kind of fucking around. Uh, so when you're doing like almost something as like a hobby on the side, it usually doesn't start big. It usually starts really small. And animation's a lot of work, so it's easier for it to be shorter. And so I would just do these things at home that are like these 1 minute little things about this guy who lives on a ranch or whatever. It's just like dumb little story. And so I think practically it made sense to think of things in shorter format through animation, but also just like I said, that's how I like to tell stories. But also it allows me to just change things up. When you do things in vignettes or these little smaller scenes, and then it just completely changes to the next one, it allows me to mess around with mediums and styles that if you had this like longer format thing, it might need to be a little bit more connected stylistically. And I mean, I just like changing things up all the time. I like the inconsistency, or you need the connective tissue to some extent, but I like just changing things up. But also it's like in what I like, the media I like. I like cartoons and shows, and I like watching anthology shows or reading anthology books and reading, like zines or short, like flash fiction more than actually like reading novels, or like reading or watching entire films for the most part. So I think it's just a reflection of what I've always liked as well.
Would you mind taking us through each of your animated shorts and maybe talking a little bit about the production process, the techniques you used? I mean, really anything that you'd like to say,
Yeah.
influences you were drawing on, any particular behind the scenes stories that you might think would be interesting to people getting into animated film.
Yeah, so I would say is anything I've done animated has been completely self-taught. I have no one's taught me anything. Some YouTube videos here and there. But I think thing that also dictated my style, which is for the most part not traditional animation, where it's you see every movement of the body, the guy walks across the room. It's more of these just kind of, I guess, buzz effects and these characters like their face and small movements here and there. But yeah, I'll start with Chalk. Chalk was I made in 2020, right after I finished college and finished Los Vagos. I was um, I was part of this like top 10 artist finalists for this thing or whatever, and they wanted me to send a video of myself or every one of those participants send a video, like a 1 minute video, just saying the reason I get up in the morning is to make change or to my art to evoke whatever. And I did it and I kind of hated it and felt weird. And my deadline was in 3 days to send it. And I just wrote this little script about these two people on a drive. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna send them this. And I got a friend. We animated for like 24 hours straight, just drink a lot of beer and coffee. And then as we were done drawing, I went with another friend and we did all the sound effects for like 24 hours straight. And oh, again, a lot of beer and a lot of coffee. And then I turned it in Monday morning at 7 in the morning, and then I had to go to work. So like Chalk, I just did in 2 days, just like cranked it out. But also that was probably one of my first projects that I said things without saying anything, where I spoke, where the dialogue was very just play that one song. Could you do that? And it's just kind of weird in this like weird world. Whereas I think everything before that was just more in the realm of slice of life. And this was more of a kind of what I like drawing is like little monster dudes and these weird figures that just live in this alternate reality that's also still our reality. Um, but yeah, that was the first one. And then I sent it in and they were like, this is cool, but not at all what we asked for, but thanks, I guess. So, and then I think the next one after that, as far as animation, that's like an actual project, not just like a small thing that's like on Instagram or anything like that, is probably the Dia de los Muertos one. That was in 2023. I was hired by the Central Arkansas Library System. They were doing this huge Day of the Dead festival and they wanted a movie. And when they hired me, they wanted to do just complete freedom, but basically say what Day of the Dead means for people. And I was thinking about it because honestly, I never celebrated it growing up. And my parents celebrated a little bit when they were in Mexico, but so I have no real connection to it, to be honest. But everything I've seen about Day of the Dead is either some documentary where like some filmmakers asking his grandma questions about it, or it's this cartoon of like a little kid in a cemetery who finds a ghost and they go through this journey. And like literally those are the only two things I ever found about that. And I was like, well, I'm not gonna do that. Um, and I'm not gonna lie and say it's this like meaningful holiday for me because it honestly isn't. Um, so I'm just gonna do what it is, and it's just the celebration of death or celebration of life, and even past death, it continues. And so I approached it through the 5 stages of grief, and just and it was originally going to be the first stage, second stage, third stage through like different mediums and styles. And I mean, one thing I do in all my work is, I mean, they say you make a movie 3 times: when you write it, when you film it, and then when you edit it. I kind of stick true to that. So after I wrote it and animated slash shot some stuff in the edit, I completely changed it up, and I kept I like dismantled the format of they have to be in a row, and more of just what are these emotions that each stage of grief gives. Um, and to me, it just made sense to do different mediums. I don't really know why, but that's just kind of how I saw it. Um, and like huge thanks to my friend Cole McVeigh. I mean, he's helped me with Chalk and that project, and also Lint. So he's been one of my big like collaborators, especially in animation.
Yeah, no, I think the different the blend of different techniques really works well. As I was watching, well, all of your films, I was really struck by how uh, how much variety there is visually. And yet it all comes together. It doesn't feel disjointed or anything like that. I don't mean to suggest that. Just that there's a lot of variety, a lot of really rich different, approaches, techniques that you're drawing on. I was actually wondering if there were any, like, as you've been making more films. I know you said, like growing up, you weren't necessarily somebody who was watching a lot of movies, thinking about it in relation to filmmaking at that time. But I'm curious, as you've continued with making films, if you find yourself going back and looking at other filmmakers' work and connecting with it in a particular way or drawing some kind of influence from it. I was just wondering if any of that has showed up in your animated films.
Yeah, I think in animation specifically, just all the cartoons I watched. I grew up on like, all the cartoon shows like Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, Disney Channel, all that stuff, but specifically Adult Swim. I watched that since I was like 3 years old. And I just loved like Aqua Teen, and I loved watching Ren and Stimpy and all these like SpongeBob, all that. And I think what influenced me a lot with a lot of my animation is that they get away with a lot of things, and I didn't know you could do that. I think that's why I gravitate towards changing mediums or styles a lot, is because I mean, one thing I loved in Ren and Stimpy and SpongeBob is their gross ups. It would be, cartoony, and then all of a sudden it's this like realistic painting that's just such in detail, and it's not even animated. It's just a painting, like a still for like 5 seconds. And I still to this day watch compilations of gross ups. Um, so that, and then just like sometimes they'd go to like puppets for some reason in a scene, and the way they do it. And to me, it just makes sense. Kind of how like for whatever reason I can't or I don't see stories in like this like long format thing. I also don't see animation in that either. It's like I mean also I think it'd be boring just like drawing the same thing or animating the same thing in the same style for so long. Um, but I think it gives breathing room to specific moments because I think the gross ups are awesome. I think they're fun to look at, they're funny, all that kind of stuff. But also it gives you a little bit of insight of the character's perspective of how they actually view something or how you want them to view something. Um, but yeah, I definitely, as I got older and started doing more work, it's actually realizing looking back, oh, I'm like super influenced by all these things that I didn't even know I was. At least in animation. And then I would say in live action, like more traditional filmmaking, I think it was around college when I started watching a lot more movies with intention. And like one of my biggest inspirations, at least for Los Vagos, was Gummo. Um, just because it showed that I think one thing I never really understood was in through most movies that you see like in Hollywood is that you think there's rules, and Gummo showed me there's actually not rules at all, and you can kind of do whatever you want, and it can still work. Um, so I would say like that, and like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the skate videos, again, they may not get the same credibility or like viewed upon as like movies or whatever, but to me they work. And it's just like an extension of the creator's like raw feelings with intention, right? And you want to make it quality and actually have a message, not just put things out there. But yeah, I would say a lot of movies like that. And then I think the most stuff lately has just been diving into like Mexican movies or movies by like Chicanos and stuff, more movies that are closer to creators like me, even if the stories aren't necessarily what I like making, just kind of seeing their processes and like what they've gone through. Especially I think in the stage of my career where it's independent, right? And how do you figure out how to make it? And then when you're done with it, what the fuck do you do with it? But yeah, I've been looking back at a lot of stuff and taking influence for sure.
I'm curious on that note about independent filmmaking. Do you see in terms of like your path forward, your trajectory that you're on as a filmmaker, do you find yourself wanting to move into a more commercial vein, or do you prefer staying in the independent camp?
Independent camp for sure. I mean, I used to work in the industry. I worked as a TV producer for a bit, for like PBS a couple years ago, and very cool job. I loved it. Very big stuff you're working on. You're working on things that are on TV. But I actually kind of hated the industry. And for the most part, that it got in the way of me making my own stuff. Like honestly, like that was like the core of it. I would just be creatively exhausted by the time I came home, and I wasn't working on my own stuff as much. And so I quit. And I think since then I've realized, or I've truly realized I don't want a career, like in the sense of working in the industry or anything like that. Um, I only want a job to have money to live, and any other money I have just goes towards my own projects. Um, so yeah, very much like, especially now, purposefully in the independent route. And the only way I see that changing is if the things I'm being paid for is my projects. Like to be honest.
That makes sense. I mean, I think it certainly allows. It seems like in animation, especially, it must allow you a lot more freedom than if you were working within the confines of, especially like television animation. I imagine that there's a lot of restrictions as far as what, I mean, stylistically, content, all sorts of things. So I imagine in independent animation, it's like a night and day difference between that and um, the commercial world. So yeah, that totally makes sense. I'm curious if there were any other, lessons from your work working for like public television and stuff. Was there anything else that you learned from that experience that even though you've, left it behind, that you are bringing to your work in terms of how you produce projects or just maybe from like an organizational standpoint?
I definitely learned a lot, like technically, of just like, producing and just general production. Um, but I think through other projects and through working on huge sets, right? Huge studio sets, that kind of stuff. I realized what's actually important in your own work. And to me, it was realizing for something of mine, I don't need a huge crew. It's actually finding, 7, 10 people, whatever, that you super trust and that you can rely on, and they're actually sold into the project, which is where something on TV is people are there because they're getting paid. A lot of people are passionate about it and they like what they're doing, but at the end of the day, they're getting paid. And in independent projects, yes, you're paying people, but maybe not to the extent you want to. And there it's hard to find, or really important to find people that are getting maybe not the same amount, but at least a close to equal amount of payout from it, which is either money or interest in the project or just, "Oh, I want to make this thing, you want to make this thing, let's fucking do it," kind of thing. That was one thing for sure I learned is that the people you work with you for different reasons. And in television, they work with you for money. It's their job. Um, and as far as like, production stuff or I mean, you learn a little bit more about the trade, obviously. You learn like if you're trying to get money for this, this is how you make it to look credible. These are the kind of people you have to talk to. This is how you talk to them, that kind of stuff. But as far as creatively, not a crazy amount.
Now you have a new new animated film, Lint, that is has that been officially released yet?
No, I'm doing some final touches. Actually, Philovision 2 is happening this Thursday, and I'm trying to get a finished product by then. If not very, very close. So that should be, I guess, technically the premiere. But no, it hasn't been released yet or anything. But with that, I probably plan to screen it there. Hopefully you're screening soon.
Yeah.
Um, and also just set up screenings throughout the city or and like a small festival run. And then, but I'm huge about accessibility. So once it's done, it's bullshit run of festivals or whatever. I just want it online so people can see it.
Yeah, the
Um,
discoverability, that the online release provides. I feel like that is something, and this is something I'm always talking with other, not even just filmmakers, but just, creative friends and music and stuff. It's always this question about how to put the work out there. I think this is actually kind of going off maybe our main topic a little bit, but it is something I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on, given that you've, screened in festivals and look at like I guess like the setting up like smaller or participating in smaller screenings and things. I'm curious how you feel about this with, we're living in obviously it's like the post, internet, post YouTube age, obviously, where online and Instagram and TikTok and all these other ways of putting video content out into the world. And I'm curious if how you feel about, you know, for for filmmaking, whether we're talking about live action or animation. But when you have this finished work that you've put all this time and effort into and everything, what is, what are your thoughts on how to get that out into the world? I mean, it sounds like you are kind of like me in that you want to consider all the different possibilities, whether it's a screening somewhere, a festival, or then eventually having it out on YouTube. But I'm curious if you could like speak to, what you see as the relative benefits, advantages of these different, venues for a release.
I guess it depends what you want, right? Like if your main priority is making money, then yeah, maybe festivals, hopefully get distribution, setting up screenings of your own where you're selling tickets and you have other artists participating, whatever, right? I mean, but for me personally, it's ideally, yeah, making money. But I'm just huge about accessibility. I just want because I've worked on so many projects where this crew works on it for weeks or whatever it is, long days and nights, and and then you just kind of never see it. And it's like, what happened to this movie, man? And the director's like, well, it's going through this fest. It's not ready yet. It has to be, the premiere has to be like this. And it's just like, dude, who gives a fuck? It's a fucking movie everyone worked on. The whole point of it is for people to see it at the end of the day, right? At least from an artistic perspective. It's you make something, you put it out there. So for me, that my main priority is people see it. Um, and through that avenue, then you can find ways to support yourself. So if it's setting up your own screenings and collaborating with other artists, maybe they're screening some of their stuff too. Maybe you do sell tickets, maybe you do, merch on the side, whatever. Um, but also too, it's like not everyone can go to those things. And so and I get it. There's the thing of, you don't want to just put it out there, then everyone's seen it, then no one comes to the screening, anything like that. I get that idea. And there is maybe a balance with that. But at the end of the day, once I've gotten all my stuff out of the way, or like, okay, it's on festivals, whatever, I'm just gonna put it online and like on every format I can, YouTube, Vimeo, whatever, Daily Motion, just like anyone, because I don't know. I want my parents to see it if they can't go to a screening. I want my cousins in Mexico to see it. I want this random dude in Idaho to stumble upon it randomly when he's on Googling stuff. Um, so for me, that's the most important thing. And kind of what you said, right? It's like post YouTube online stuff. I think a lot of times um film just movies are weird, I think, because you make a painting, it goes in a gallery or you sell it, right? You make a movie, if you have a screening, great. If you don't, it's just online and you never have that connection with the audience, and that actually like live moment. And I'm like all for that stuff. I think it's important to and maybe it comes from like my more artistic background than film background, but I think there's a lack of like community and celebration when a movie's made. Uh, it's all in the hard work and the behind the scenes, but then when it's done, it just kind of lives somewhere in the ether. And so to me, it's really important to have screenings, or events or something that one, people can come enjoy themselves in like a community aspect. Also, okay, cool. I got eyes on it. People got to see my shit. Maybe I made a little bit of money here. Maybe I broke even. Maybe I made a profit. But also, like with that, you create platforms for other artists that are doing the same stuff, giving them actually like a voice and yourself. Um, and ideally, and this is something I've always been trying to work towards, is ideally you create some sort of system that's repeatable. That I make a piece of art, I do it in a cool way that makes money that pays for my next piece of art. And I mean, like for me with Lint and the other project Pigeon Tongue is I want to approach it more like how a band approaches things, where like you go on tour, you hit up different theaters and venues throughout different cities and maybe New England or just different parts of the country or even internationally, and that way you set up screenings how you want, as opposed to festivals. It's all these people paid money to get in. They saw like one movie out of like 10 bundled up together. And this way you actually have like creative control of how you want to make an event and what you want to do with it. Um, but it just depends on the project too. Like, for example, Yegoy, the feature film I produced, we had this, the premiere was pretty good. We had about like 500 people, sold out show, whatever, in this venue in Little Rock, and we sold tickets. We made a little bit of money off of that. Um, but then we had a second screening where we were asked to show it at the University of Arkansas, and they asked me how I wanted to do it, how we want to do tickets, whatever. And I was like, I want this to be free, but make it free, give like free food and drinks to people, and then just pay me and the director. And that way, so we're happy, but also everyone can go. There's no excuse for anyone not to go. Because I've been to screenings where I'm paying $20 for this movie I've never heard of, and this guy I don't know who he is. And I get it, you're supporting artists, but also it's like some people just can't do that. So trying to find ways, which is tricky, right? But trying to find ways that it's at least accessible for random people to go to.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting, like a balancing act that you kind of have to do between, because yeah, you want to of course support the artists and make it possible for people to, make some money out of the event if possible. But I'm also I think we're kind of on the same page with the idea of making it like a free to the public in the sense that it'll encourage more people to take a chance on for them what might be an unknown quantity, and I think that's one of the most important things is just to get the films out in front of people, in front of audiences, and let them discover it. Let them see what especially if it's like a program of films, like when like screenings like the Philovision Festival, where it's a program of short films, and people can come in and see all these different movies and find ones that they really vibe with, like the director that they whose sensibility they really get into, whose style they really get into. And I think that's one of the best ways for discovery. And I think it's one of the things that gets lost with the um, with online video releases is that you've got this huge selection of films, and it's a great way of getting movies out into the world. Like you said, some random person just kind of Googling things and coming across your film. I mean, that's a great thing if somebody can discover it that way. But I think the benefit to the screenings is having that, like you said, it's community. It's really just having a community space where people can come together and and talk with filmmakers, where filmmakers can meet each other, support each other's work. To me, that's where you really build something uh, bigger, hopefully, that something will kind of come out of that. And I'm curious if you think, especially now, because there are so many ways to watch things online. People watch movies, TV shows through streaming. There's, endless video content through, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Reels, and everything. Do you feel that there's something still really special about that experience of sitting there in the dark with an audience, seeing your film up on the big screen?
Yeah, for sure. I think and not even like my own movies necessarily, but you experience things differently when you're around other people. I mean, even just think about like stand-up comedy. You watch someone special on Netflix, it's not even close as funny as it might be if you're in the audience. And I think the same thing applies to movies. It's maybe it's the worst fucking movie you've ever seen, but you're almost like validated in that everyone else fucking hated it. And the same thing when a movie's amazing. It's just like, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I'm watching a movie and I don't really like talking through movies necessarily, but I kind of want to tell my friend right next to me this little thought I had from that scene that was awesome, right? And I think that just builds up even more and more when you have a full theater. Um, and then there's obviously the experience of just like it's a bigger screen, better audio. You're actually experiencing it how the filmmaker intended you to experience it, and there's no distractions at all. It's this space where it's dark. The only thing you can actually see is the big screen in front of you. Your phones are off or like on silence. The only reason you're getting up is to go take a piss or get popcorn or something. And so you're actually, and I think especially now, and just like everything's so quick, right? With technology, it's one of those things where you can still just sit down and just digest it naturally. Um, and I think I don't know. I feel like you get more out of something when you're actually focusing on it way more than you're sitting on the couch with the window light coming through. There's maybe some reflection on the screen. The audio's not great, and your downstairs neighbors playing music. Like it's just different and not as well and not as good. Um, so I would say just like from the quality of the actual viewings like process, um, but also just like I don't know, it's fun. I think you go, you drive somewhere, you sneak in some snacks, maybe you get some popcorn, you're passing it with your buddies, you're like talking, and then afterwards you actually have people to talk to about it. And it's actually this event where you give it its proper like time, as opposed to this hour and a half that as soon as it's done, you go and cook chicken. Like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I definitely think something to be said for having no distractions. And that's not to say that the experience has to be like sitting in a museum, where it has to be like dead silent and no, nothing going on. I think there can be there's definitely like a place for that kind of audience energy, when the audience is reacting to the movie together. I think there actually can be like a lot of, energy in the room. But I think it's like the extraneous distractions. It's like you're saying about your neighbor playing music or having to get up and start the oven for dinner or something. It's those kinds of distractions that don't they just take away from the experience. But like when you're there with an audience, even if it's a very kind of a very vocal audience, really getting into the movies. I mean, I think that kind of heightens it for everybody. That can really bring you into it, and it can also, especially I would say like with comedies, for example, if people are there's a lot of good laughter, a lot of good energy in the room, it can actually call your attention as a viewer to things that maybe you would have kind of just missed if you were watching it on your own, or wouldn't really have thought much about. But when there's like a moment that really lands really well and gets a big laugh from the audience or a big reaction, I think it kind of cues everybody in and it brings everybody together on the same, like you're kind of on the same wavelength watching it. So yeah, I agree. I mean, these kinds of festivals and in-person screenings are just a great experience, and like you said, a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I think it also extends to it obviously there's just traditional format, right? Just people sitting down, there's a screen. But then I think it really makes sense to people that, especially that do more like installation or experimental things and how they can change the format. And maybe there's like a little bit of music in the back. Just like you can really dictate how you want the experience to be for the audience, as opposed to just it's there somewhere and they just watch it. So I think it gives a lot more control too to the creator.
Yeah, I mean, that's yeah, that's a whole other topic I could go off on. It's something I've been thinking a lot about lately. I'd seen a film last summer here in Baltimore called Vexations. It was by a Brooklyn-based filmmaker, and what he did was he took it was a traveling film show. It involved 16 millimeter reels. It involved easy, like 50s and 60s easy listening records that he had fished out of a dumpster to put together like a live soundtrack. It involved live narration. It involved audience participation and projected slides as well. So he had all these different media kind of coming together, and it was a really unique experience. And I'm glad that there was enough of a turnout at the screening to, I think where everything was able to it was like firing on all cylinders. He had enough of an audience there that the audience participation could happen, and that really got me thinking about something that I guess had already kind of been in the back of my mind, but then it really brought it to the fore, which is just how um, film shows have especially like at a DIY level, have the possibility of being interactive, of having the element of surprise, like you get with a live music or other live performance. Because I think the one thing with film is it is largely a fixed experience on the screen. But there's a lot of ways I think you can make it a more interactive, more surprising, spontaneous type of thing. If you're bringing in, like you said, some music, if you're bringing in anything where it can get interactive with the audience. So, those are all things that I think we can continue to explore with live screenings. It doesn't have to be traditional, just like the filmmaking doesn't have to be
Yeah.
traditional anymore, right? I mean, the screenings can be surprising and innovative in their own ways. And yeah, drawing on art installation, I think, is a big part of that. Encouraging the audience to become a participant in the creative process. Because like you were saying, there's the three steps of production of like writing, filming, and editing. I mean, like the three, the idea of like making a movie three times, with each of those steps. And I think we can almost think about adding performance and presentation to that as well. Like how does it get out there into the world? And so yeah, I think there's I feel like that's an area there's still like a lot to explore. But with DIY screenings, I think we're starting to see that. Um, so you said that you're probably going to be hopefully premiering Lint at Philovision, which is on February 20th, right? Up in
Yes.
yeah. Do you have any other projects that you're currently working on that you can tell us about?
Yeah, so I have this feature film that we're finishing up called Pigeon Tongue. That was shot about 2 years ago now, where we were in Romania for a month. But it's basically about these two American journalists that go to the Romania they go to Bucharest to investigate these like series of disappearances. But it kind of just focuses on them kind of losing their sense of reality. But it's like an absurdist dark comedy that we've been working on for the last couple of years, and we're very close to finishing. And that's exciting. I think the plan with that is probably some festival stuff, but like I said earlier, I just want to set up my own screenings for the most part.
Yeah,
I want to set up my own screenings in different cities, really build the community there and like an audience. Um, but yeah, that's the biggest thing. And then besides Lent, premiering there, and what plans with that is besides those screenings, next couple of screenings with Lent, kind of we're talking about the live thing. I really want to do some sort of like collaborative thing where because it's so hand drawn and more art than I think film for me at least. I want to almost do like an exhibition gallery of different artists that do things similarly and that's centered around this screening. And then when the movie's done, you don't just leave. You can actually, oh, let's keep talking about the art around us. And it's all kind of the same world. So those are the two projects that I'm really focusing on right now and finishing up.
great. Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered a lot about your films here. Is there anything else that you would like to say about them? Anything for an audience who's just maybe starting to explore your work for the first time? Anything that you would like to tell them, or is anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would guess I would say is just anyone seeing my stuff for the first time, hope you like it. but also just for anyone making things or just I hope to be a good example of an independent route that you can pretty much make whatever you want to a certain extent, I guess, without anyone being your boss, anyone telling you how to change it, anyone doing that. Obviously, like feedback's good and all that kind of stuff, but just forming your own circle that you trust that at the end of the day helps you reach whatever your goal was, which is self-expression, trying to say some message or just make something funny, whatever. But yeah, I just hope my work evokes something in people. If you hate it, you love it, whatever, but I hope you come out of it with some sort of feeling. And maybe some of the stuff may be a little confusing. It may not make the most like plot sense, but that's not really my goal anyway. Um, yeah, and then just if you're trying to make stuff, just make it. There's no excuses. It's all bullshit. All these gatekeeping stuff, it's all bullshit. So just make whatever you want to make.
Yeah, that's the thing. Just yeah, get out there and put your vision on the screen any way you can. I agree with that. Last thing, if there's can you just let people know where they can see your work? Any particular websites or platforms you'd like to point people to?
No particular websites. I definitely have a YouTube channel and like a Vimeo account with like all my stuff on there. But I mean, the best way to find anything I'm doing is finding me on Instagram. It's LAWEEZ 8, Luis 8. But there it's just I post all my shorter stuff, little short animations, little things like that. But also any updates I'm doing. So for example, Yegoy just got into Amazon Prime like 2 days ago, posted about that. And then anything as far as like future projects like Lint, I'll be posting about that sometime soon. And then when Pigeon Tongue's finally done and we have shows going and like the actual premiere, I'll be posting about that. So that's definitely the best way to find me. And if you're trying to watch any of my previous works, um, on my Instagram bio, I have like this Google Doc that has links to all the stuff I've done, and like also excluding film as well, like print and other projects I've done. So yeah, that's probably the best way to find me.
Great. I'll put those links in the description of the video as well, so people can find it. All right, well, Luis, I think that about covers it. Thank you for speaking with me on here today. It was great having you on the show, and I hope that this will lead some more people to check out your work. I think there's a lot there that's worth checking out, a lot of interesting ideas and techniques, and especially for fans of animation. I hope everything goes well with your screening. I hope the premiere works out with at Philovision, and maybe at some point in the future, if you'd like to come back on here and fill us in on future projects that you're working on, I'd love to hear about that.
No, yeah, thanks, Matt. And whenever you want, just hit me up. I'm always
All right,
down.
thanks.
Appreciate it, man. Take care.